Wow, greetings. This has been a wonderful conference. I really missed seeing a lot of you in person. It was good and great to see you on Zoom when I could. Once again, I'm Emmanuel Waddell, Program Officer and a member of the HBCU-UP and CREST team at the National Science Foundation. On behalf of the CREST team of Marilyn Suter, Nikki Gass, and Victor Santiago, we thank you for your participation in this first virtual HBCU-UP CREST PI conference. The information shared by Dr. Cassandra Newby Alexander in our opening plenary was educational, inspirational, and transformative. We must remember the past, acknowledge achievements, disseminate information, and prepare for the future. We all have something to contribute. We have the benefit of building on what others have done. Though we were unable to meet in person, we hope that you were able to gain useful information that will enable you to manage your current award and submit for additional awards, i.e. go back and listen to Rashawn's Zoom session in your different breakouts. We look forward to interacting with you through your submissions, reports, panel participation, and dissemination of your research discoveries. We went over some good tools in the last breakout. We hope that you gained as much from this conference as we have. I hope you were able to expand your professional network. I followed Claudia Rankin's example, and I discovered more people to follow on Twitter, so that's been great. Finally, thank you to AAAS, Iris Wagstaff, Allison Gonzalez, and the rest of the team. You were tremendous. AVEX, you were stellar in making this event technically possible. During the last breakout, we had some teleportation, which was great, and we figured it out. It was a lot of fun. Thank you to the NSF program officers and staff who were able to participate in our breakout sessions. Finally, thank you, the participants, for participating. You are a critical part of our success. Returning to our theme of Forged Through Time for this time, I'm going to leave you with a quote shared from the former permanent HBCU-UP program officer, Claudia Rankins. And this quote comes from Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois, and he wrote Prayers for Dark People. It was a collection of prayers for students at Atlanta University. Now is the accepted time, not tomorrow, not some more convenient season. It is today that our best work can be done, and not some future day or future year. It is today that we fit ourselves for the greater usefulness of tomorrow. Today is the seed time. Now are the hours of work, and tomorrow comes the harvest and the playtime. Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois. I turn this over to Michelle Claville. Thank you.
So thank you, Emmanuel. I also echo my thanks to everyone who has made this conference possible. And in similar fashion as he's thanked the CREST team, I also recognize the entire HBCU-UP team. Of course, you know Emmanuel Waddell, you know Carlita, and then now you know me. And then you also need to know Toni Edquist. Without her, we can't do what we do. And so I wanted to just reflect about the meeting itself. We entered this year, 2021, ever so thankful that 2021 was gone, not realizing that we would still have to deal with some of the same challenges of last year. Most of us are still working from home, teaching classes, performing other academic duties, and some of us are trying to figure out how to keep our research going when it's so ever difficult to enter those research spaces. If that wasn't enough, we're also playing multiple roles at the same time. We're K-12 teachers, principals, counselors, truant officers, elder care workers, and the list goes on. And on top of that, our beloved Dr. Claudia Rankins had the absolute nerve to retire. Even more appalling, your program officers had the nerve to still convene a meeting during this season when we're dealing with so many different challenges. And to all of that, all I can say is yes. Yes, we most certainly did convene this meeting, and we're glad we did. For in this meeting, you engage with program officers across the agency outside of HBCU-UP learning how to submit more competitive applications to programs that maybe you were reluctant to apply to in the past. From what what I saw, it was obvious that you were engaged. In addition, you heard from Dr. Cassandra Newby Alexander, and from her, she basically set the foundation for the entire meeting. She did exactly what we asked her to do, and that was to lay the foundation for the meeting. And in that 1 hour, she taught and reminded us that true history, obscure history, once revealed, dispelled certain myths that have hindered too many of us from doing or valuing the work that we do. With that history lesson, we were provoked to value our institutions, our students, our work, and I would dare say even ourselves a little more than we may have in the past. The networking sessions, we learned from each other strategies to increase dissemination of research results. We explored more how to apply for funding across the agency. And then we also talked about continuing our work during this new normal. So with this closing event, now that we're here, we're trying to understand what to do with what we learned. And it is for this reason that we've invited our beloved Claudia Rankins to help us chart the future by way of this town hall. But rather than providing a formal introduction to Claudia, I wanted to do something a little different. We decided to ask Dr. Kelly Mack, surprise, to introduce Dr. Rankin. Without further ado, please welcome Dr. Kelly Mack.
Thank you, Michelle, and good afternoon, friends and colleagues. Thank you for your patience as I interrupt our usual programming. I know we want to all hear from Claudia. I certainly do as well. But I think it's appropriate that before we do that, we pause to ready ourselves to hear from her, because she is no longer our program officer. She now exists as our T'Challa, leader of our very own HBCU Wakanda. If we don't take just a moment to reflect, we may never fully hear and receive what she says or accomplish the work that she will lay out for us. Because you know there will be work that she will ask us to do, and she will require that we do it well and hold us accountable if we don't. So in the next few minutes that shall be mine, I want to discuss her leadership and ours. And as I do, I'd like to invite you to use the chat to insert any comments, accolades, or notes of appreciation that you'd like to offer to Claudia. Let's just flood this virtual chat space for her. Recently, the whole world has been abuzz about leaders and leadership, both inside and outside of the academy. For those of us who have been examining this line of work for so long, it is like watching a garden bloom in spring, or like seeing the perfect plan emerge out of the madness and noise of disagreeing colleagues, competing priorities, and hidden personal agendas. Nothing is more encouraging than to know now that all eyes are on those who make decisions for us. You could argue that perhaps this attention to leadership is the result of all the failed leadership we've seen around the world recently. Or perhaps it's because of the many complex and complicated ways our leaders are challenged by the chaos of COVID. Maybe even still it is because of what COVID has taught us about leading, that self-care is what's critical to the leader. I would argue that the chaos of COVID has shined a bright light not only on leaders, but also leaders like us who are scientists, and shown us that the very systems and structures of oppression in our society are also in STEM, and that while these systems disadvantage so many of our Black and Brown students and colleagues at the same time, these same systems also privilege us in many ways. Yet and still there is work for us to do in dismantling them. So that begs the question, how? How do we as leaders and scientists chart a more daring and liberative path forward for our students, ourselves, our colleagues, and our institutions in ways that honor our humanity, and especially in a post-COVID era where the landscape of higher education is expected to be unlike anything we have ever seen before? While I am convinced that there is a leader in all of us and that it is time for our leader selves to emerge, I am cautious because not all can or even should lead, at least not like this, not in the way we've done it up until now, without fully understanding our history and the troubled pasts of our institutions or knowing the struggles from which they emerged. Certainly not without reflecting on and appreciating our leaders of our past or without having connected ourselves to something far greater than ourselves. When even one of us is successful, it should be a victory for all of us. But it only can be when we decide that success is never really success if it comes without being connected to a greater responsibility to share with others who have and maybe even desire less. I'm sure by now you see where I'm going with this. Claudia has been and still is the consummate example of the kind of leader for our Wakanda who thinks of others always. She is exactly the kind of leader who Frederick Douglass spoke of hundreds of years ago. He understood that true leaders are the women and men who, under peculiar difficulties and without ordinary help of favoring circumstances, have attained knowledge, usefulness, power, and position, and have learned from themselves the best uses to which life can be put in this world, and in the exercises of these uses to build up worthy character. Douglass spoke of the women and men who owe little or nothing to birth, relationship, or friendly surroundings, who owe little or nothing to wealth inherited or to early approved means of education. He said they are what they are without the aid of any favoring conditions by which others usually rise in the world and achieve great results. They are in a peculiar sense indebted to themselves for themselves. For if they have traveled far, like Claudia, they have made the road on which they have traveled. And if they have ascended high, it is because they have built their own ladder. Such women and men as these, according to Douglass, whether in the college or in the factory, whether professors or plowers, are entitled to a certain measure of respect for their success. Nevertheless, though, I'm sure even Claudia will agree that the road before us is laid with too much opportunity, too much expectation, and too much possibility for us to even consider that we can seize upon opportunity and possibility and make them count if we go about making change happen through our programs in the same ways we've always gone about it in the past. From where I sit, we need to have a different mechanism of action from here on out. If we, as PIs, co-PIs, program managers, key personnel, advisory board members, evaluators, program participants, and thought leaders continue to find satisfaction in our own separate worlds with our unique institutional and personal challenges, while still allowing others to fill in what they know or what they've heard about our worlds, our institutions, and our needs, then one thing is for certain: nothing will change. And Claudia has taught us that. The reason why so many of us can be here today as funded principal investigators is because she had a bigger and a better vision for us than the one that was laid out by Congress when it mandated NSF establish the HBCU-UP program. She thought and thinks more of us than she often does of herself, and sometimes more than we ever thought or think of ourselves. And if there is no greater lesson that I've learned from her, and the radical anti-racism scholars whose work I've been reading of late, thanks to her, it is that we ourselves cannot change if we as leaders do not change. If we as leaders do not change, we are destined to, as the brothers of Omega Psi Phi so eloquently put it, build bridges to nowhere and carve out tunnels to nothingness. In other words, that proverbial needle, that brainless, stupid needle will only move when we move. All of us move as a collective. It's only as a collective that we can become that thing that is more than we could ever be separately. That thing that makes it impossible to come after any one of us without needing to take all of us down first. And that thing that makes it possible for someone to honor all of us when they honor any one of us. I am the first to admit, though, that our leadership collective, even with all its potential for mightiness, needs some work, mine included. So what do we do to lead as a collective? I am so glad you asked. We simply, very simply, hold hands and lead. Why hold hands? Another good question. Thank you for asking. It's because we all learned to hold hands in kindergarten when they taught us to cross the street. We all know that lesson. And there is sufficient enough risk out there for all of us to make holding on to each other so necessary. If we are together holding hands, we cannot fight each other. And if we are together holding hands, as Diana so eloquently put it, ain't no mountain high enough, ain't no river wide enough, and ain't no valley low enough to keep us from succeeding. We can be united as one community and as one voice, a collective voice, which, like that of George Floyd, can be the guttural whisper that moves us to change at the very core of our souls, while sounding the alarm that positions our contemporaries and our disciplinary cultures for a new normal of broadening participation success that finds us at the center of STEM reform, not at the margins, and as leaders, not as afterthoughts. It's time for us to make some collective refusals now. Claudia, I think we have to agree to refuse to be defined by a narrative that sums up the extent of our scientific acumen as no more than the capacity to create a nurturing environment for educating future scientists. And I think we have to agree to outright refuse the crumbs that fall from the tables of partnership, where others get to dine heartily, build infrastructure and capacity, and decide on national priorities. And finally, we have to refuse to allow ourselves to pivot away from the leadership example that you set for us, Claudia, or back down from the fight that you fought for us. You have shown us to every day try harder than Avis, move about the country more than Southwest, reach out and touch more than AT&T, live stronger than Nike, bring more good things to life than GE, be greater than Kellogg's Frosted Flakes, and more networked than Verizon, to give more breaks than McDonald's, and to fly higher than Delta. And above all, you've taught us, Claudia, to be unafraid of taking the road less traveled.
Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both and be one traveler.
Long I stood and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth.
Then took the other as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear.
Though as for that passing, that had warned them really about the same. And both that morning equally lay in leaves no step had trodden black.
Oh, I kept the first for another day. Yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back.
I shall be telling this with a sigh somewhere, ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by.
And that has made all the difference.
Average velocity is the change in position divided by the time of travel. It is a privilege to share a few thoughts to honor Dr. Claudia Rankin's body of work at the National Science Foundation for over a decade. Claudia, the full magnitude of your impact is a narrative waiting for an end to be written. And yet, at this moment, it is crystal clear that through your leadership of HBCU-UP, you have demonstrated the importance of a mindset of high expectations, catalyzing intellectual wealth, and maintaining a healthy balance of optimism and realism. Claudia, in closing, you travel through time and space like a falcon. As you well know, a falcon is a rare bird found on every continent, except scientists think not on Antarctica. A falcon is able to change directions quickly. And Claudia, with each pivot requiring your intellectual leadership, you have maintained your integrity, You have consistently fought to advance the progress of HBCUs, and you've been deeply committed for your adult life to create justice for Black people in the United States and throughout the world. Claudia, I envision that when the end of the narrative about the full magnitude of your impact is written, it will include testimonies about how your sowing through your body of work at NSF led to the story of decades of reaping season of innovation, discovery, and broadening participation at historically Black colleges and universities. We in the HBCU community and Society of STEM Women of Color salute you today, Claudia, and always. A brilliant physicist, a strategic thought leader, a doer, not just a talker, a social justice warrior, and a falcon.
So when I think back to the early part of my career, I remember meeting Claudia, would say it was probably about 2 years into my career, and I met her at the conclave. Just meeting her firsthand, to me, first impressions are everything. And so with that first impression of her, I could just tell that she was a truly genuine and complete person. And so one of the key things from that meeting, from there, I had numerous opportunities to meet and interact with Claudia, and just her legacy throughout everything that she stands for has just been very instrumental in my career. Her authenticity, her wisdom, her generosity, even the aspects of invitations to being able to come to the National Science Foundation to come and complete reviews. Every time I've been invited to come to NSF, Claudia always finds time to sit in between our sessions, and even during lunch, we have the opportunity to sit and just chit chat, and just such a genuine and amazing individual. And just thinking about her love and her passion for HBCUs, it just truly resonates through her, and it's very infectious amongst others as well. She has a distinctive way of being able to show that she cares not only about you professionally, but also how she cares ultimately about you, just truly as a person as well. So one of the key things that I've learned from her is when Claudia speaks, you pause and you listen, because ultimately whatever it is that's going to come out of her mouth, it's something that's going to be inspiring and something that's completely and truly very knowledge-based. Earlier this week, as I was thinking about this tribute to her, I heard someone say a very simple phrase, and that simple phrase was, "Be you, they'll adjust." And that's one of the key things that I have learned from Claudia, simply because from the moment that I've met her, she's always been the same authentic person, and she's inspired me to continue to be myself and allow others to adjust to exactly who I am and for my purpose. So with this, I commend you, Claudia. We celebrate you. We congratulate you on this amazing journey that you have had. Congratulations on your retirement, and may God speed and may the force be with you. Congratulations.
Hello. I'm very pleased and excited in joining all of you in honoring Claudia Rankins on her past accomplishments and her exciting career at the National Science Foundation. I've had the pleasure of knowing Claudia for over 15 years, and throughout the entirety of that time, Claudia has been a consistent force and advocate for our HBCUs, our students and faculty. She has welcomed innovative thought and approaches in addressing some of the systemic challenges that many of our universities continue to deal with today. Many of the projects I've worked on with Claudia included curriculum development, capacity building, research experiences for our students, and strategy planning for HBCU partnerships. Our collaborations have introduced our faculty and students to others nationally, as well as globally in Africa and in Asia, highlighting HBCUs as true global centers of innovation and engagement. As you may know, Southern University was one of the inaugural participants of the HBCU-UP implementation program. It was during this time that I had the great pleasure of first meeting Claudia. Since then, our relationship has grown, and throughout this time, Claudia has been an advocate of my continued professional development as an NSF proposal writer, reviewer, and a member of NSF advisory committees. Many of us had similar professional experiences with Claudia and can attest to her diligence and commitment in working with others. You know, one of the hardest parts in paying tribute to someone is being able to capture the essence, the qualities of that person in words, when words seemingly do not adequately reflect the significant impact we feel that that person has had in our lives. But I'll give it a shot. Claudia, you are a great person. And for me, that speaks volumes. This one word, great, is evidence in how you engage, how you work, and how you lead. You're honest and full of integrity. You are a great communicator and are always willing to listen. You are committed, resilient, and passionate, inspiring and encouraging others. You hold yourself accountable to your mission while empowering the innovation and creativity of others. Claudia, thanks for being a true partner, a true collaborator, and a true friend. Congratulations to your diligence and your excellent career at NSF. You will always have a friend in me. Thanks.
W.E.B. Du Bois called it double consciousness. He was talking about a way of being that African Americans must cultivate in order to navigate the not race-neutral culture of the United States. And today, for most people of color, this navigating is not so different than what Du Bois described in 1903. One way to be in your own world, and another way to be in their world. And since their world is the world of the larger culture, virtually all of public education, and certainly science, those of us who navigate in these spaces must learn two ways. I know this. My colleagues know this. The vast majority of my students know this, but rarely, if ever, have I known a regular white person to know this. At first, Claudia comes across as a regular white person. When I met her applying for my first NSF HBCU-UP grant, she was, supportive, knowledgeable, with that cute German accent, but in a regular kind of way, yet always encouraging me to do the best science that I could. It was my colleagues that started to paint another picture of her, especially those who had grants outside of HBCU-UP. They told a completely different story by defining her antithesis. She's no Claudia Rankin, they would say about some new program officer. He's not like Dr. Rankin after having some difficult exchange, or this one, prepare yourself. There aren't many Claudia Rankins out there. So as I branched out into other NSF directorates, I did prepare myself, and I found that my colleagues were right. These other program officers knew their way. They didn't necessarily know the ways of HBCUs and were not particularly interested, I found. Yet the legacy Claudia leaves is her willingness to teach on both sides of the aisle. Those on one side learn the realities of a racialized experience in which they may be completely blind. And for the other side, while she is keenly aware of the obstacles, still admonishes us, do the best science you can do. There are costs, I am sure, to being this way. But Claudia, I have heard you say that any of the professional sacrifices you have endured for the sake of your students was worth it. I know you probably don't think of me as one of your students, but I certainly consider you one of my teachers. You demonstrated that it is possible to be your truest and most authentic self while walking in both worlds. You modeled creating your own way and still do the best science you can do.
Greetings, Claudia. I'm honored to share a few words as we celebrate you as you embark upon your retirement. As the saying goes, first impressions are lasting impressions. Well, let me take you back to our first exchange. It was a phone conversation, and I remember it oh so well. It occurred during my grant negotiations, which was 5 years ago. Before we got into the specifics, you said, "Let me close the door." I knew that closing the door meant more than having a private conversation with me about the intellectual merits of my proposal. Closing the door meant that you would have to work some magic behind the scenes to ensure that the door would be open for an HBCU graduate committed to racial justice and employed at a teaching institution could walk through and make contributions to STEM education. On another note, last night, I told my mom that I would be celebrating your retirement today and that I would provide a few words about your legacy. She lit up because of the lasting impression that you made on her, especially during our last visit to NSF last summer. She still goes around town with our P-Case picture, so everyone in Memphis knows who you are. However, last night my mom told me to go and prepare for today, and she immediately hung up the phone on me. Her abrupt departure from the phone conversation signaled that she knew how much I've been influenced by your leadership, as well as the significance of being included with this influential group. Over the years, I've witnessed your stellar leadership and your unwavering advocacy for HBCUs within NSF and beyond. Your deep commitment has inspired me to carry the torch even further, so please know that I plan to build on your exceptional legacy through my scholarly endeavors in mathematics. Therefore, your dedication to HBCU-UP and career will be felt for years to come. Thank you for being a consistent champion of HBCUs and for your contributions to STEM education research. I wish you all the best in your retirement.
All you know that Claudia has trod two paths during the past 30 years or so of her life. A scholar teacher, academic administrator in STEM generally, and physics specifically for 22 years at her alma mater, Hampton University. And 12 years as an outstanding and dedicated NSF administrator with a deep passion and commitment to social justice and to advancing HBCUs from the margins to the center of STEM undergraduate education. But what you may not know is that her favorite pastime is Formula One racing, a true aficionado. Of course, a love of motorsports, and fast cars, I might add, should not surprise any of you given her cultural ancestry in Germany, home of the Mercedes, Audi, and driving on the Autobahn where speeds of 120 miles an hour or more are no oddity. Claudia, I guess I can tell you now, once I've learned about all of this, I have spent the last 10 years of my life in trying very hard to avoid placing myself in a position where you would offer me a ride in your car. I'm not quite ready for a Formula One expert driving me anywhere. Just a few words about Claudia and her legacy. Claudia, you may be retiring, but your legacy will live on. You have taught us how to be a scholar of the first rank without losing intensity in our quest to advance social justice. You have modeled how to use whatever position we might have, whether in government or academia, as a platform for transforming rhetoric about social justice into bold actions to achieve it. And in the process, how to make this a better planet for all of humankind. You are the embodiment of a social justice academic warrior, the defender of HBCUs. You may be assured that we have learned much from your example and that we will accept the torch that you are passing on to us, a torch that will require us to assiduously pursue the quest for a more just and inclusive STEM community and world.
This is a very celebratory event for a very special person. You know, when I think of leadership, which is the influence of individuals or people within that organization to achieve a specific purpose, that's very common, but also an extension of that is a term I would call leadership character. And leadership character, in my mind, reflects empathy and authentic purpose. Empathy and authentic purpose. When I think about Claudia, that's something that she has exhibited for not just 12 years, but much, much longer, even back to her Hampton University days. Empathy with regard to the development of students and faculty, with regard to the mission of HBCUs, but also authentic purpose and recognizing the strong need to produce those well-qualified graduates from those HBCUs and support the dedicated faculty and staff that endure that process in higher education every day. Thank you, Claudia, for being such an advocate for HBCUs, expanding that STEM population for underrepresented groups. We appreciate you, we applaud you, and we thank you for all that you've done for the current institutions, and believe it or not, for investing in those for the future. Thank you, my friend, and I wish you well.
Friend, advocate, communicator, partner, collaborator, teacher, champion, doer, warrior, defender. These are all words that describe what you mean to each and every one of us, Claudia. And they are a testament to and testimony of a job well done. Martin Luther King once told us that if it falls your lot to be a street sweeper, that you should sweep streets so well that all the hosts of heaven and earth will have to pause and say, "Here lived a great street sweeper." Today, we, the principal investigators, co-principal investigators, program managers, and grant writers of HBCU-UP past and present, acknowledge and proclaim that Claudia Rankins has led, managed, budgeted, fought, and strategized so well that we and so many others must now pause and say that she is indeed a great program director. Many people have heard Claudia and I tell the story of how we met. I won't bore everyone with the whole story of that day and all that led up to it, but suffice it to say, we started on the same day at NSF. We were asked to report to the conference room. I got there before her. It was actually to be the very last time I would ever beat Claudia arriving anywhere. Claudia is never late for anything. And not only is she not late, she's always extra early. Anyway, I got there and was relieved to see I had arrived early enough to pick my favorite seat. I put my bag near my seat and I went to get some nice collations from the continental breakfast table. But when I got back, there she was, sitting in my seat. And I'm thinking, who is this? And what do I do now? It's the first day. Do I say something? Do I just move? Anyone who knows me well knows I really like the corner seat. I'm obsessed with it, actually. So it's the first day and I'm stressed out enough as it is. I thought I had the corner seat. Turns out I didn't. Claudia did. But I really needed that seat. Somehow she must have known. Claudia always knows, right? And as I'm contemplating all of this in my head, Claudia looked up at me and said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm sitting in your seat." And she moved to the seat next to mine. And she's been on the move ever since, moving into places where we could not go and where we're not always welcome to make it better for us, moving others to action, moving obstacles out of our way, moving aside our critics, moving money out the door, moving us to the front of some NSF funding lines, moving us from the margins to the center of STEM reform, and all the while, moving us into our greatness. And Claudia, you should have no doubt that this road you have traveled, that has kept you moving for so long in so many important ways, has made all the difference for us. And because of it, and you, we are all the better. Thank you for loving us so much. We all thank you. And may God bless you real good. May He keep you and make His face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May He lift up His countenance all about you and give you peace. We are ready to hear from you now, Claudia. But I'd like to take my speaker's privilege and my status as a principal investigator, and in true fashion with an event such as this, first offer to you an official proclamation on behalf of all of the all of the principal investigators of the HBCU undergraduate program, past, present, and future. And our proclamation reads as thus. Whereas Claudia Rankins has served for the past 12 years as program officer for the National Science Foundation Historically Black Colleges and Universities undergraduate program, initiating the Research Initiation Awards track, the Targeted Infusion Projects track, and the Broadening Participation Research Centers track. And whereas Claudia Rankins has been identified as our T'Challa and defender of historically Black colleges and universities, and whereas Claudia Rankins has championed, tolerated, fought for, taken a road least traveled, and made all the difference for the nation's HBCU community. Be it hereby resolved by the principal investigators of the NSF HBCU-UP program on this 5th day of February in the year 2021, that from this day forth, this community will demonstrate its collective leadership, just as Claudia has done, by reclaiming our institutional narratives through scholarly writing. And be it hereby further resolved that these scholarly works, fashioned after the poignant blogs that Claudia Rankins herself has written and published over the years, will be compiled in March of every year by the NSF HBCU-UP funded Center for the Advancement of STEM Leadership. And they will be issued as the Rankins Reader, which shall be henceforth from today formally known as the official canon of HBCU STEM faculty across the entire nation. Congratulations, Claudia. But most of all, thank you. Family, it is my honor to turn over the mic to our T'Challa, defender of HBCUs, my buddy, Claudia Rankins.
Oh, wow. I'm not sure how you expect me to follow this or say something now. I had expected to come on this afternoon to just share a few thoughts with you. I had no idea all of this would happen. So I need to, first of all, thank everyone, particularly Kelly, for the kind and loving words to Neil, Michael, Cynthia, Cheryl, Chris, Orlando, Keith. You had me crying. Khalida, Michelle, and Emmanuel, thank you for including me in this PI meeting. It would have been my first time in 20 years not being at a PI meeting as either a PI or program officer. So what I prepared may not be quite fitting now after all that I've heard, but it's what I wrote, and I'm not a great extraneous speaker. So I'll start out with an attempt at a joke. And I'm slightly altering the words of the famous Brain in the comic Pinky and the Brain. And I want to tell you, do not wait until tomorrow to take over the world. Start right now. I'm honored to have this time to share some thoughts with you. And I'm sure, like me, you're overwhelmed by what has happened since I saw you last February. Events like the COVID-19 pandemic, the Black Lives Matter movement have brought to light what we knew existed all along, a deep and divisive disparity from the rest of the country for the Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities we serve as faculty and administrators at HBCUs and other minority serving institutions. Disparities in health, wealth, education, funding, housing, environmental issues, you name it. I want you to ponder what it means to be an educator at an HBCU or Hispanic serving institution, where your job is more like a mission. You stand on the shoulders of educators like Fannie Jackson Coppin, Mary McLeod Bethune, Mary Peake, Elma Imes, Etta Falconer, and among you today, Orlando Taylor. You teach at institutions steeped in the Black community and its culture. You have an obligation to honor the history of these institutions who were established to educate the Black community at a time when white institutions refused to do so. Today, everybody seems to like W.E.B. Du Bois, Fisk alumnus, and later chair of the sociology department at Atlanta University, now Clark Atlanta. And I too have a quote from him. He said, "The function of the university is not simply to teach breadwinning or to furnish teachers for the public schools or to be a center of polite society. It is above all to be the organ of that fine adjustment between real life and the growing knowledge of life, an adjustment which forms the secret of civilization." You have the privilege to work at an HBCU, and please see it as such, a privilege. You can have part in that fine adjustment between real life and the growing knowledge of life while educating your students. There's so much we can complain about working at HBCUs and use as an excuse of not doing our work. But as Cheryl said, I won't let you take that excuse. What I'm telling you is that no matter the circumstances, your time is now. Seize the opportunities these troubled times are bringing. There's increased spotlight on HBCUs, increased philanthropic giving, even slightly increased federal funding. All of this, I promise you, is fleeting and temporary. So be prepared and ready to take advantage to set up lasting change in your classroom, your lab, your department, your schools. Scholarships to students are nice and necessary, but not sufficient because they're not lasting. Finding ways to teach introductory mathematics, to teach students what high schools fail to teach them, while at the same time keeping them engaged and excited about the topic, that is lasting. Finding ways to engage students in research that they see as beneficial to their lives and communities is lasting. Providing an environment in STEM that is inclusive and conducive to all types of learners is lasting. Strengthening your standing as faculty in the academic community by having your contributions heard and read is lasting. Erasing injustice and speaking for social justice is lasting. Having federal funding can help you become a leader in STEM education or research. I can attest to that. Without federal funding, I would have been a faculty member teaching mathematics and physics, which I love, dabbling in the theoretical models in particle physics that I like to work on. But federal funding allowed me to have an impact on thousands of students from middle school age to graduate school through research opportunities, innovative teaching practices, new curricular offerings, support for faculty, summer programs, and so on. In the introduction to his book, Shelter in a Time of Storm, about HBCUs, Dr. Jelani Favors writes, "Beyond the written course of study at Black colleges, an unwritten second curriculum thrived. This second curriculum was a pedagogy of hope, grounded in idealism, race consciousness, and cultural nationalism. More importantly, within the non-collapsible space of Black colleges, this instruction and mentoring was beyond the reach of outsiders." You may notice that Dr. Favors wrote of the second curriculum in the past tense. I, however, argue that it is still today at the core of the success of HBCUs in educating Black students. I have also come to realize that the second curriculum is an affirmation of the faculty whose work at HBCUs is legitimized by the second curriculum. So I want you to promise me that you are as unapologetic in insisting that your research is for the benefit of your students and your community, as PIs at predominantly white institutions have been for centuries in advocating for their students and community. Thank you. And again, thank you for this wonderful event.
Thank you, Claudia. Upon my arrival, we have been celebrating you, and you still deserve so much more. Each and every time, I find myself in awe listening to the testimonies of others regarding your work. And much like times before, all I can seem to muster is thank you. There are truly not enough words that can accurately capture what you mean to this community. The thousands of faculty and students who have benefited from your efforts. And me. I accept the metaphorical torch that you have provided. And I can assure you that this work, this very important work, will continue. On behalf of the HBCU-UP team, Michelle, Emmanuel, Tony, and I, it is my honor and privilege to recognize you with this plaque. I'm not sure if you can fully see it.
Lovely.
This time we weren't as successful having it secretly placed in your house without your knowing it. Although I can assure you it will be delivered in the near future. But this plaque is but a small token to acknowledge you and your service to all of us. It is a clock to recognize your gift of time. The time that you have invested in advocating on behalf of the entire HBCU community. The time that you have spent educating others of the legacy and power within our HBCUs. The time that you have spent processing over 1,000 grants, totaling more than $400 million. This clock means much. And so it reads, 12 years of service presented to Dr. Claudia Rankins. Thank you for providing shelter and support for the STEM education and research through HBCU-UP, February 2021.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. We love you, and we look forward to carrying this torch. We also look forward to more tweets and more thoughtful contributions, and your more thoughtful contributions to this community. As I close, to our participants, we thank you for your time with us this afternoon, your time with us for this entire 2 days. Thank you for sharing this time with us. To AAAS, Iris, Allison, the team, AVEX, thank you for your partnership. And to everyone assembled, we wish you safety and we wish you peace. Thank you.
Wow. There's not much left to be said, but congratulations to you, Claudia. You are truly, truly treasured for your lasting impact on HBCUs. And thank you so much to Kelly for facilitating such an amazing and inspirational and well-deserved tribute. So I am here to adjourn this meeting on behalf of our AAAS, AVEX, and NSF teams. I'd like to thank you all for participating in our first virtual HBCU-UP CREST PIPD meeting. We hope you enjoyed this meeting. Please share on social media about the events over the last 2 days using our hashtag virtual HBCU-UP CREST. We are dropping the link to the post-meeting survey in the chat, and we will follow up via email to send the survey to you to complete as well, to just give us your thoughts and perceptions on this meeting. Thank you so much and have a great weekend.